Combination to the face of Ayala. Tremendous exchanges here in round two. Ayala continues.
Yo, this is Trav with Travis Sports Bag. As you can see, I'm on location again today because we're talking boxing. When you see Bias, you know boxing is about to go down. But before we do any of that today, let's do the YouTube thing by subscribing to the channel. Give the thumbs up. You know what that alarm bell is for so that you can get all of our drops, not only just boxing, but other sports that you may be interested in. So without further ado, let's also get those 1,000 subscribers as well. I've been looking for that for a while. That would be an opportunity for us to interact. If we have 1,000 people, I think that's enough to interact and have a minor show when I don't have the show. We can interact with one another, answer questions, ask questions, that kind of thing. So make sure you do the subscribing and hitting the alarm and all that other stuff. So now, without further ado,
share the video.
I know why you're here. You know why you're here. You saw the thumbnail, and it's about Johnny Tapia. Man, Vida Loca, the lost warrior that no one seems to talk about too much anymore. And Bias and I are going to be here for the next couple of minutes, just giving you an overview of what Johnny Tapia may have meant to boxing and where he stands right now in the pantheon of boxing. Not just Latino Hispanic boxing, but the pantheon of boxing. He was an entertaining fighter, just like Arturo Gatti, just a little smaller, just a few more problems, but he was Johnny, and that's what made Johnny, Johnny. So, Bias, being here today, where do you think Johnny Tapia stands in the pantheon of boxing? No, not an all-time great, just a pantheon.
You know, I think he ranks up there. Skill-wise, he had a lot of skills. He had good footwork. He had fast hands. You know, he didn't carry his power once he started moving up in weight, and I would say that's his only weakness. But talking about Johnny Tapia, the fighter, and not talking about his story, we're talking about a 3-division champion. We're talking a guy who fought a bunch of great fighters, won a lot of fights, provided a lot of action, and maybe not an all-time great, but for his generation, you can't put a lot of fighters ahead of him.
I think he was more like a comet. He just came through at this moment. He shined. He had his problems. He was exposed to the world, and we all got a chance to see him, enjoy him, and go through a lot of what he had gone through, at least in a public way, not like his wife Teresa or his family members, but we got a chance to see Johnny Tapia's worst, and we saw him in the ring at his best because that seemed to be his sanctuary. Is he a great fighter or a great memory? I think he's both.
I have to agree. In my opinion, he was a great fighter. As I mentioned, he had a lot of skills. In my opinion, his only weakness was he lacked power. He was a great fighter, and of course, he was a great story. And I'm pretty sure if you're a boxing fan, you know what that story was. And unfortunately, he had demons. He fought them every day. But, you know, I don't have anything bad to say about the man.
No, there isn't.
Out of the ring.
No one's here to be judgmental. We're here to look at Johnny Tapia's career and celebrate what the man meant while he was here. I'm sure he meant it to a lot of people in the boxing world, particularly in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he's from, where they loved him and they still love him right now. You know, he had a rough upbringing like most boxers, but I don't think there are many boxers who had gone through what Johnny had gone through. You know, he was told that his father was killed before he was born, which wasn't the truth. Later on in life, he found his father. However, when he was about 7 or 8, his mother was killed. And they found out she was stabbed about over 20 times with an ice pick. So he grew up with that. And then he's been in the gangs, or been around the gangs of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And this is the life that he had. A boxer lives in tumult most of the time. This is why they thrive. This is what drives them to boxing. And Johnny Tapia, with 65 knockouts in his amateur boxing days, that type of rage, that type of background drove him to boxing, no different than Mike Tyson, no different than any other boxer out there. In fact, he did not let it distract him. Boxing was his sanctuary.
I'll tell you, I remember the exact fight when I became a fan of him, when he fought Danny Romero. I had followed Danny Romero on Tuesday Night Fights, and I was going for Romero. I knew him better than I knew Tapia. But there was a moment in that fight, I can't remember if he hit Danny low or they had a clash of heads. And prior to the fight, they talked about the hatred. And Johnny said, "Danny, are you okay?" Man, that showed a lot to me. And from that moment on, I had nothing but respect for that man. And after that, I became a Tapia fan.
Yeah, and Tapia, his style, he's one of those guys where his spirit in the ring is someone you wanted to root for. You know, it's like Arturo Gatti when he went to Atlantic City and people came out to see Arturo Gatti because they kind of felt in a way that they were fighting along with him, or they inspired him solely to push him past his limits. And we've seen it so many times. And this is what Johnny Tapia looked like. He was the epitome of a spirited fighter, pushed past the limits in pursuit of victory, in pursuit of finding out who Johnny Tapia was. We found out who he was in the ring, where you're going to find out who you truly are. You're going to be exposed to the masses. Whatever's inside of you, your character, it's all going to show in the ring. Johnny Tapia was that guy. And I mean, with his amateur background, his pro background, the problems and demons that he faced out of the ring, the drug use that stole his career once upon a time. But then Daniel Romero, that's probably the big win on his record, the battle for Albuquerque. And the big sin there was, you have the Pitt, which is the University of New Mexico. They have this fight at the Thomas and Mack Center in Las Vegas. They could have had that fight and they would have filled up the Pitt. Albuquerque was ready for that fight.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that was a mistake in my opinion, but still it was a big memorable fight. And you mentioned that the ring was Johnny's sanctuary. I can't think of any other boxer that had as much fun in the ring as Johnny did. There were times, he played to the crowd, throw his hands up, throw rapid fire combinations and smile. I mean, that guy was having fun in the ring. And he was fun to watch, and I can't give him more respect than that. He entertained the fans, and I can't remember him ever being in a boring fight.
No, his style wasn't made for that. His spirit wasn't made for that. He lived like a Tasmanian devil outside of the boxing ring. He fought like a Tasmanian devil in the boxing ring. As I mentioned earlier, fighters live in tumult. This is what drives them. So when people use excuses for certain fighters, their favorite fighters, about this is a distraction, that's a distraction, this is what a lot of the top fighters go through. They don't live normal lives. Boxers aren't normal people, especially at the top of the game, the top of the food chain. These fighters are different kinds of people. Johnny Tapia had at least 11 different trainers throughout his professional career. And he still showed the consistency, of course, until everything kind of caught up to him moving forward. But he showed the consistency to really be a dominant champion there in that time. And as you mentioned, Danny Romero being the big fight, the epic fight of his career, because then he fought Paulie Ayala. And Paulie Ayala, I always said, had a horseshoe in his butt. This guy was one of the luckiest guys ever. But he gave Johnny his first loss. And Paulie Ayala, by the way, was a good boxer. But the first fight he won legitimately, that second fight, was certainly a gift for Paulie Ayala, which means that horseshoe still lives.
Yeah, I agree. No doubt in my mind, Tapia won that second fight. No doubt at all.
And he has multiple belts, as you said. He's 3-division champion. He's one of the little guys. He's one of these guys that they don't really give attention to when it comes down to the smaller fighters. I mean, Michael Carbajal and Chiquita Gonzalez, they put together an excellent fight. Michael Carbajal being the first flyweight to get $1 million fight. But he and Chiquita Gonzalez put together one of the best in that era, 3 fights that you probably would love to see. Johnny Tapia had his opportunity against Ayala, and it didn't turn out to be that kind of a series, But it was a great fight nonetheless. Both fights were great. I just thought he was robbed in that second fight. And, and it was a controversial loss. I think Bobby Chaps was one of the broadcasters there, and he said as much. But this is someone you really have to look at, and I wanted to give him his respect because it seems like outside of him just dying, no one really talked about him too much anymore. And I see so many other fighters getting props who deserve it, but Johnny deserves it as well. He was a prisoner of his own self, and he always said it. He never looked forward to tomorrow, and he looked at the past as something that already passed. He lived in the present, and it was a fight all of the time.
Right. And I think most people remember him, fighting maybe at 122, 126, and they forget he started as a flyweight.
Yeah.
He moved up quite a bit. It's not often those flyweights move up to bantamweight or super bantamweight, junior featherweight, whatever, and Johnny did that. And you mentioned he was a 3-division champion, and not many people come from flyweight to be 3-division champs. So that right there tells you what type of fighter he was. He was a great fighter.
Yes, and the problems, though, I think it has to really be focused on what he had to deal with outside of the ring. The life he lived, the hell he must have caused his wife. He said it himself. She said it one time or more than one time that it was a living hell, but she loved him. That's a dedicated wife that stayed with him to the very end, literally to the very end, until he died in 2012. And then they had his funeral at the pit where everyone came to pay their respects, people crying in the audience. They lost a huge figure for not just Albuquerque, the entire community, but the boxing community. And because he was a world champ, you're talking internationally. So because of that, that's why I thought we needed to give our spiel on Johnny Tapia, pay our respects. We don't have to have a long, drawn-out show about it. I think we needed to hit some points I believe people just need to acknowledge, because it seems Johnny is not acknowledged as much as he should be. So do you have any closing thoughts about this?
Yeah, I agree with what you just said. I echo those sentiments. And I think if you think about what type of person Johnny was and what he was looking for in his life, just go to one of his quotes. He once said, "A hug and a kiss is better than $1 million." He just wanted to be loved because he didn't have it growing up, you know, and that's what he was looking for his whole life.
And unfortunately, his life ended early. I mean, earlier than it should have. I don't believe he even got a chance to see gray hair on his head. He got a chance to see his 3 boys. That was a great thing, but he'll never be a grandfather. But things like this keeps Johnny Tapia's life alive and his accomplishments. There's some type of a focus on it, not just because there's a tragedy, but because there was a great fighter that we needed to talk about. So thanks for joining us today. And of course, as usual, we have a couple of these other sports right here, just in case you want to check them out, because this isn't just boxing. We have a multitude of sports if you want to check them out. But Bias and I, when you see us together, you know there's going to be boxing spoken. So until next time, check out Yo Trav Sports Bag. Until next time.